Good evening, everybody, and welcome to episode 6 of Wilbur Talks FPL, where we talk everything FPL and the Premier League in general. Apologies, as we didn't have a podcast last week, as I was actually on holiday, so had no actual facilities to record the podcast. So we're going to touch on the game we've missed, probably just a few minutes on that, and then we're just going to move on to how we performed in the latest game week. As usual, I am joined by Charlie and Sam. Hope we're both doing well. If we just
Okay, thank you.
Glad to hear. Good stuff. If we just touch on the previous game week, so what game were we on there? We would have been on game week 5, wouldn't we?
Yep.
I'm just going to touch on yours first, Charlie. Game week 5, if you can cast your mind back that far, did it go all right for you?
Yeah, I did have to go back and check because I've completely forgotten what happened. But I was bang on the average, so I got 55 points, which was the average score. So I guess that's pretty standard. Started to build a bit of a trend of captaining the right player, which gives me some kind of satisfaction, even if it doesn't actually technically really mean anything. But Captain Salah, so he was the player that scored the most in my team, so I'm pleased with that. And when we come to this week as well, the same thing happened there. But yeah, pretty good performances all round, except really for Dina. He's become a bit of a thorn in my side. He got an own goal, so I ended up with -1. I think he got a yellow card as well, and then went off or something like that. I can't remember anymore. But he's very likely to be making way very shortly. If not this week, then maybe the following week, because I just can't see myself. I'm not going to get. I'm going to chalk it up as a learning point, not to get sucked in by the potential of what he could offer, and remember actually what he does offer, which tends to be nothing.
You just have to catch him at the right moment, don't you? I'll go back to the famous triple captain that I did with him last season, and that worked all right. So you never know. It can work out sometimes. But yeah, bang on the average for you. What did you think of your game week 5, Sam?
It wasn't too bad. I'd had like 4 weeks that were, 3 weeks that were well above average, 1 week that was pretty average. So there was going to be a retraction at some point. I didn't have the best game week. Got 39 points against an average of 43. Slipped quite a bit in a few leagues, but nothing crazy. Let down by a few big boys. Saved by the Egyptian King and the returning Raul Jimenez to goal-scoring form. And I decided to bench Tony again, which once again proved to be an error. But yeah, overall, not too bad.
We have slightly gone to game week 6 there. I was trying to refer back to the last one, so game week 5. But it's fine. It was he was very similar to Charlie's, wasn't he?
I suppose that description is pretty much exactly the same until apart from until Jimenez. Yeah, that could have very well fitted into game week 5. Just below average, saved by Salah, and then Jimenez didn't score in game week 5, and then in game week 6, Jimenez did score. So what do you know?
I think it's basically like Jimenez and Ben Rama, just the opposite impact.
Yeah, literally. Yeah, no, apologies.
It's fine. That's a good little link onto game week 6, moving straight onto it. But I think that game week 5, obviously I'm going back to it because I think it's the only game week so far I've beat you both. But I actually benefited from the Tony side of the coin with that previous week where he got 12 points, where Sam had him on his bench again.
I also benched him then.
So if you want any benching tips, go to Sam. Captaincy tips, go to Charlie. But what did I get? I got 64, I believe. So probably the only one above average out of us for that game week. But coming forward to this game week now, looking at my own team, I'll bang on the average with 43 points, which I think across the board, kind of what you touched on, Sam. There's been a lot of high scoring weeks, and there's kind of going to be a regression at some point. So my team looks like a bit of a car crash when you look at most of it. There's literally Salah again, you've got Semedo, Tony and Antonio getting a few returns, but then everyone else is 1, 2 or 3. So not much to write home about there. So we've touched on Sam's. How did your game week 6 go, Charlie?
So it went okay relatively. I ended up with 49, which, as you mentioned, the average is 43. So I guess I can't complain. You never feel happy with that kind of score, but when you look at the average, I guess, and like you say, week to week, it's completely different. And some weeks everyone does really well. Some weeks people do less well. I actually think when we come on to game week 7, I think it's got a real potential for a really high scoring week. But yeah, this week was clearly a very low scoring week generally. So the small sort of wins really helped. So for example, I captained Antonio, and yeah, that's a bit of an interesting game. But I just have this feeling now with Antonio that he just needs that one good chance and he'll put it away. So even though I think he only scored very, very late on, maybe beyond the 85th minute, maybe later, I still had some confidence in him to get something, because as long as they can create a chance for him, I think he puts it away. So he's very likely to feature in my thinking for captaincy this coming week. Yeah, Salah getting his goal as well, and Rafinha, they were kind of my main point scorers. Dina did actually, despite me just slagging him off, did get a clean sheet, which was something, I guess. And then Connor Cody getting his bog standard 6 points, which is what I've got him in for. So yeah, generally pleased. But yeah, I'm expecting a lot more points coming in next week.
Yeah, I think Dinier's just done that to you, hasn't he? You just thought about taking him out, and then he's like, I'll just put a clean sheet in there just to put a little bit of doubt in your mind. But...
Oh, there's no doubt in my mind. He's gone.
But yeah, I think, like you said, well, when I'm looking at a league table, you've obviously gone above Sam now as well. So in our little league table, that score for you has been decent. So it takes you second behind Pete at the minute. You're on 419, Sam's on 413, I'm on 407. So like when I was looking at it, I'm like, I've not had the best week, but I've actually got closer to the top than I was before. So I'm happy with that average for now. But like you said, we can push on the coming weeks.
I think the key point from that as well is how tight our league is. I mean, the league is so like that's basically just 1 week's difference potentially, depending on captain choice and stuff like that. It could just be a different captain choice that makes that difference. So yeah, all to play for.
Yeah, it can just be one pick of a player as well, because I always refer back to the Ben Rama and not having him the first 2 game weeks. If I had him, I'd just be up with you guys at the top really. So it can just be that one pick that makes the difference. But yeah, if we move on to the actual results from the game week, and I think we have to give Charlie some limelight. Please don't take an hour talking about the North London derby, but a very impressive win. Well, I'm not going to say how bad Spurs were to start with, but you've got to be very impressed from the Arsenal point of view on that one, Charlie.
Yeah, of course. It's I think there does have to be some context of it being a North London derby, and then by association, that just means all the players are going to be up for it, especially being at home. Our record against Spurs at home is crazy good. I think we've lost 2 in about 20 years. And I think the sort of flipping fortunes of both team or form of both teams going into the game kind of gave me some confidence as well. I predicted 2-1 before the game. Because we've seen how Spurs have kind of regressed, and we've talked about on the podcast before how even when they were winning, Spurs' underlying statistics didn't look great. And then the kind of reverse of that, Arsenal started badly, but have started getting players back in. So the likes of Thomas Partey coming back from injury, the new right back Tomiyasu coming in. And yeah, it just all kind of culminated in this one result, which was obviously very nice to see. I think the biggest thing I'm liking about it is just how much more settled the side looks. Last season, you wouldn't know, for example, who's going to start up front, whether Aubameyang was going to be on the left, whether he could be up front, whether Lacazette was going to come in, whether Pepe would start. Whereas now it just feels a lot more secure, I think, particularly defensively. That back four, I think, has now played the last 3 games in a row, which just hasn't happened for a very long time. We've always been chopping and changing, which is never good, particularly for defence. And I think, yeah, that front 4 now, and it's something Mikel Arteta's talked about a lot, about having Aubameyang up front, behind him 3 really technical players in Smith Rowe, Odegaard and Saka. It just works perfectly for how they sort of link up, and that you could see that in all 3 of the goals. It was some form of link up between the 4 of them. So everything just seems to be clicking with them, and having that backed up by actually having a defence you can rely upon. So particularly Tomiyasu, I think, has been a sort of fan favourite. It's been a long time since we've had a right back that can actually defend, so it's nice to see someone that can come in and do. I don't think he lost a single aerial duel. He's so good in the air. I think he's 6'2" or something, which so is obviously a bit different to your standard right back. And there's been talk about how he can play centre back as well. So that's kind of quite obvious to see from how he plays. And yeah, Thomas Partey as well. He just looks so. I think when he's in the team, everything just ticks so much better, particularly defensively, and he's able to screen them, and he's by far the best tackler in the team. But also just his ability to ping balls forward and play them into the right areas as well. And everything, everything just works so much better as a unit when those players are in and it's kind of bearing out. I think there's a bit of hesitancy just because, like I said earlier, it's a North London derby and you expect the players to be up for this kind of game. It's the kind of following games where maybe it's like an away to whoever, Palace. We've got away to Brighton coming up. We've got Palace coming up. It's those kind of games where if they can still kind of develop that level of interplay and positivity in the squad and playing on the front foot, that's when I'll really start to believe that actually, okay, this is something that's there's some kind of clear direction going on here. And then I think by the complete sort of opposite, I would say about Spurs. Really, I think that they were absolutely dreadful. I don't think you could pull out a single positive performance from them in this game. The game plan was all wrong. It was really weird to see. So they, and especially as they had just come off the back of, obviously they lost to Chelsea 3-0, but they had started quite well in that game by being quite aggressive. And they did the complete opposite against us. And they sat back and they tried to fire direct long balls over the top into Son and Kane. And it kind of, like, obviously at the Premier League now, there's at the Premier League level, there's so much analysis and stuff that's done by the teams. But it felt almost like they just hadn't done that about us because they were trying to play these long balls into Son, who was marked by Tomiyasu, and Kane, who was marked by Gabriel, who are probably our best two headers of the ball in the team. And they didn't try and switch it up. They didn't move Son maybe over to the right, which perhaps could have worked better. There just seemed to be no flexibility or adaptation to what was going on in front of them, which does, we kind of talked about off the podcast a little bit earlier, does make me think that there will be some worries about Nuno going forward as a manager, particularly as he wasn't even their first choice. But yeah, it just looked all wrong for them. I think they won't end up bottom half of the table, but I don't expect them to have any real expectations of doing anything good as long as they keep playing like that, because it was just very poor. None of them really tried to take the game by the scruff of the neck. Kane looked so off. He was completely at fault for the third goal, giving the ball away, and then just he did try to run back and make an effort to win it back, but yeah, he was just completely non-existent, which in North London derbies, he's normally a guaranteed person to score. He's always up for those games, and he was just completely off, as we've seen throughout the season. So yeah, I would be fearful if I was a Spurs fan, because the star player is not really performing, and so it's basically all on Son to do something. And he had moments, but when you've got no real creativity, they're completely bypassing their midfield. I don't know how they expect Son to be able to do anything with that. So very, very pleased with the performance, and hoping the team use it as a kind of platform to push on. And particularly as we've got no European football, I think that kind of allows that positivity to carry through into each league game, and there's no sort of disruption with having to change the teams for European games. So yeah, obviously very pleased.
Yeah, definitely. I think one of the points that you said about like Arsenal being really up for the game as well, like Spurs just, as if they didn't know it was a North London derby, they just didn't show any passion or anything, which I was disappointed to see it as a neutral, just to get a bit of competition there. Kind of that first half an hour, it was over, wasn't it, how well he was playing. But yeah, I quite like the look. Well, your team in general, I quite like that front four. I'm not overly sold by Ødegaard yet, but as you've touched on, I think Partey threads it together quite well. If you can keep that first 11 fit, you can do pretty well. I'm not expecting you to get Champions League, but I could see a point where you can be the best of the rest, like getting 5th place probably. You might even, if you get lucky, push someone like United who might not do as well, but you never know. But yeah, a lot more positive for you compared. I think what you said, like you and Spurs have completely turned over the last few games as well. Like you mentioned before the podcast, Nuno being manager of the month, and then he could get sacked, which is kind of crazy. But yeah, good for you, Charlie, on that one. So if we talk about another exciting game, to be fair, probably the most exciting game of the weekend involving Sam's team. What did you make of your game against Brentford?
Well, before we get into what was probably the game of the season, I just want to bring us back down to a touch of reality here. That Wilbur, you've just said Arsenal might finish fifth. Let's just I will take whatever price you want on Arsenal not finishing in the top five.
Let's just make it clear. Will said that. I didn't say that.
You'll have fun away at Brighton next week.
I said he'd have a good run and keep that fear. I'm not sure I'd make a bet on it, but.
Sorry. Back to serious games. It was a good game. The Saturday night football, Liverpool, Brentford. I thought it was a really, really good game of football. Obviously, a little bit disappointed not to get the 3 points. It does feel like 2 points dropped, but Brentford fully deserved a point. I think Liverpool deserved a point as well. I think a draw was a fair result. Some moments of brilliance from both teams. Some moments of not so brilliance from both teams. Just end-to-end football. Caution to the wind. That's what the Premier League is all about. And yeah, still up there, still top of the tree. But yeah, no. I mean, I think there's going to be a lot of teams that go to Brentford this year and really struggle just to get anything from any game there. I don't think a point at Brentford is necessarily a good result before the game. I probably wouldn't have been happy with a point. But given the flow of the game, a point was probably fair for both teams. And I think going there, teams will do well to get something out of that game.
Yeah, I was going to touch on that. Were you impressed by Brentford, how they performed? I quite liked how, when they were behind, they were throwing so many men forward trying to get back in the game, which was quite impressed by. I think, I can't remember if it was the second or the third goal, where they had 3 men against Trent at the back post, and he had no chance there.
Yeah, they reminded me of Leeds from last season. Just sort of get men forward, we are going to score, see if you can score one more than us sort of attitude. Which is obviously great for the neutral and probably unsustainable over the course of a season, but we don't know yet. So, overall, fair play to Brentford. They put up a good show. It was a brilliant atmosphere. The crowd was rocking. Sometimes you just gotta take a point. And Liverpool could quite easily have lost that game. Like Tony had a goal disallowed right at the end for offside, which the Sky commentators were desperate to celebrate. Overall, it was a decent point, not a good point. But when you put it in the context at the end of the season, I'd be interested to see what results teams get at Brentford as to how that point sits in and around the rest of them.
Yeah, it was a class finish by Tony, to be fair. I think part of it was how good the finish was. But,
yeah, it was a good finish.
And it also would have helped my FPL since they had him on the bench again.
Just a quick update from the Champions League. My man Mo is back at it again. 1-0 to the Reds, and City are losing. So that is good news.
You love to see it. Well, we just need Liverpool to be losing, then I'll love to see it. But yeah. So
I enjoyed that it's just quickly touching on the Champions League. The fact that it's a team with Mbappe, Neymar, and Messi up front, and it's Gay that scores.
yeah. Just typical, isn't it? I think Ander Herrera is their top goal scorer so far this season. He scored so many goals, which is just ridiculous with that front line. But anyway, a bit of a tangent there.
Yeah.
So we've touched on your two teams. Can we just skip over my team? That'll be fine. Yeah. Not a great performance. I'd argue the week before wasn't a great performance because I actually went to that West Ham game and we were obviously lucky to get away with a win, really, because a Noble's penalty at the end. I don't like some of the attacking players. I think it's the greediness in the attack. I saw a lot in the West Ham game where Ronaldo would take a shot instead of squaring an easy pass to Greenwood, and then Greenwood did exactly the same in the previous game. I think he had 7 or 8 shots in that game, Greenwood, and none of them were in a decent position where he could have made a better chance from it. So I'm not overly convinced I've kind of hinted on it on some of the other podcasts that I'm not overly convinced. They're clearly missing that midfielder that we've talked about most of the time. But I think arguably it was probably fair a draw in that game, maybe. But if anyone was going to win it, Villa, fair play to them, they did play quite well. So I've not got particularly anything more to add, except I will be looking, because United have got a more difficult fixture run coming up. I will not be on treble Man United for sure. I'll be getting rid of Bruno, Greenwood, or Shaw, depending on how I can fit it around there. So we'll skip on from that one and talk about some other title contenders in the Chelsea-Man City game. Have you got any thoughts on that game, Charlie, and the result, and from what you saw?
Yeah, I think it's just one of those where it kind of exemplifies why the Premier League is so interesting to watch, because week by week everything changes so much. There's the number of different title contenders there are in the league. So because Man City were off the back the previous week of drawing 0-0 to Southampton and only having, I think, one shot on target, which was absolutely bizarre for a Man City side, especially a Pep Guardiola Man City side. And then coming in against arguably, I would say, I was going to say their biggest title rivals, but perhaps Sam won't like that, particularly sitting at the top of the table. So coming in away to Chelsea, a Chelsea side that have beaten them, I think, for the last 3 times they've played. That must be absolutely huge for them. And yeah, I think it just kind of is their way of stamping down their mark, saying they're still in it. I think people were starting to think it's a little bit unraveling this, but always just this constant talk about whether or not they can play without a striker. Ironically, it was Jesus that actually got the goal. And yeah, I'm not really sure what to make of it. I feel like the titles can be so close this season that it's going to be down to these kinds of games that are going to affect it. But there seems to be just slip-ups left and right from all the teams. So yeah, I don't know what's going to happen, but I'm really enjoying it. And the fact that I don't think you can call it between these 2 teams, and clearly that sort of slim scoreline exemplifies that. I think Man City were the deserved winners on the day, though. They did have a few more chances that they should have put away, as did Chelsea, but I think Man City had the bulk of the chances. But yeah, I think it was maybe some just rewards for Guardiola finally getting his own back on Tuchel.
Yeah, I think it's probably him getting his midfield self right in that Champions League final. He just got it completely wrong. But yeah, I have to agree with you there. Like, I think it was kind of a result that City needed. Just obviously we haven't forgot about them, but it was just kind of a statement result, especially it being away from home. Just kind of puts them to the top of your thoughts again, like we're still here. Not that they've ever gone away, but definitely still who I'd be predicting to finish first, but a long way to go. What did you make of probably your 2 closest title challengers, Sam?
Well, yeah, I think there's absolutely no denying that either City or Chelsea have to win the league this year. They've spent outrageous amounts of money in the summer. They are technically the 2 best footballing teams in the league, probably the best attack in the league against the best defence in the league, if you put them on paper. Chelsea bottled it, unfortunately, at home. A really good chance when they were in a good run of form, not conceding many goals to put in a performance that really shows where you're at against teams in and around you, and they choked a bit, really. Not one shot on target in the whole game for Chelsea at home. If you're pushing for the title, is not good enough. So I've been really complimentary of Chelsea over the start of the season. I think they've played the best football in the league over the course of the first 6 games. But yeah, they were really poor against City. And never write off Man City. They'll be there or thereabouts at the end. It's going to be a long season. And Chelsea will hope that it's just a bit of a blip, I think.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see if Chelsea can do it over that long season, because I always argue that the Champions League is easier to win than the league. So they need to extend that form over 38 games. So I'd still, in my ranking, it's still City favourites, then Liverpool, and then Chelsea's. I'd slightly argue. I think you're trying to play down Liverpool's chances a bit there, Sam, with your comments.
Liverpool have got a good chance of winning the league. If Liverpool win the league this season, it'll be one of the Champions League, one of the champions' performances of all time, if that's even a phrase. When you're going up against 2 super spending powers in English football, who can just put the money on the big players season in, season out. That they should win it. Before the season, no one was talking about Liverpool when they were predicting league winners. I think pretty much everyone had City down to retain it. And then towards the end of the window, after Chelsea picked up Lukaku, a lot of people were sort of on that Chelsea hype, if you like, coming off the back of a Champions League win. I think if you look at it, it would be way more of a disappointing season for either a Chelsea fan or a Man City fan if they didn't win the league than for a Liverpool fan if we didn't win the league.
I see where you're coming from. We might agree to disagree on that one. I'm not sure I'd rank Chelsea the same. I understand if City didn't win the league, they'd obviously be disappointed. I'd argue slightly about Chelsea, even though their fans will hype it up a lot with the Champions League. But yeah, I think whoever wins it will say they've won one of the most competitive Premier Leagues we've ever seen, with that top 3, top 4 kind of competition. I'm sure people probably put it on the CV saying they beat Ronaldo in a season either way. So yeah, I think it's good. Well, I think it's the best position for Charlie as the neutral to be able to sit back and watch them all. I think at some point Man United fans might end up as a bit of a neutral if we fall off in 4th, but not going to rule us out yet. We'll see how that one goes. Was there any other fixtures from the game week you wanted to touch on that anything stood out for you, Charlie?
I guess just quickly a couple. Wolves getting their first win of the season. We've all kind of, this is more from an FPL perspective, but all kind of gone heavy into Wolves because of their good fixture run. So it's good to see that starting to turn into actual results, and also it's just nice to see him there scoring as well. Clearly, there's been something off about him, potentially because of his awful injury that he suffered. But yeah, it's just nice to see him get back on the score sheet, and you feel like with Jimenez firing, then that really boosts their prospects massively, because we've seen in previous seasons how it kind of just relies on him really to get the goals. And if he can score, then they are usually a good defensive side, so they can usually keep the other teams out or keep them limited to the number of goals they score. So yeah, I thought that was just nice to see. And then also just the Leeds West Ham game. I thought West Ham were the deserved winners. I think Leeds were always going to struggle with their defensive injuries. But yeah, it's just my man Antonio again, just so reliable. Yeah, I just completely fancied him against that Leeds injury-struck defence, and he came up, and it was also nice to see as well. And I think this is maybe a sign of things going forward if Bamford remains out. I think he's meant to be out for a couple of weeks, but literally all of Leeds' attacking potential just goes through Rafinha. That's the only real option they've got for conjuring up anything. So I'm pleased, despite the fact that they've got a few injuries, I'm pleased that I've got Rafinha in my squad, and again, I'm sure we'll talk about it towards our game week 7 and potential wildcards. I think Rafinha is a must-have because I just think he's so crucial to that team going forward.
Yeah, I think at the minute it's just like Rafinha or nothing, isn't it? And I would actually be like targeting Leeds if you've got attackers who are playing Leeds, because they've got barely any defence, and they always seem to have like a 2-2 or 3-3 in them as well, so can benefit from both sides there. I think, as we touched on earlier as well, Sam's happy with Jimenez to getting his first goal since he's got him in his team now. And it's similar to what Charlie said, it's really good to just see him scoring again, isn't it? I think you could see the big relief on his face when he scored that as well. I like Wolves more away from home than at home, which is surprising given the fans being back, but their defence is quite solid, and I prefer when they sit back and attack on the counter when they're at home against smaller teams. That they don't look, I say smaller teams, more people who sit back. So I think the last game against Brentford, they didn't do particularly well. Got found out by Brentford. So you wouldn't expect it, but I prefer Wolves fixtures away from home. And Semedo again missed another big chance, which is fantastic to see. But in fact, he's going to be one of those ones that I keep all season, isn't he? And he's not going to score once or get any attack in return. But we'll see with that. Did you want to touch on anything we've discussed on those games, Sam, or any other fixtures?
I pretty much covered it. Yeah, covered it well.
Yeah, I think it's a good point to mention our kind of three-way bet that we had as well. And
do we have to?
To mention Adama Traore's performance. I was looking at the points because we put the bet in like 3 game weeks ago, and I didn't even bother adding up Traore's points because I just knew he was last.
You know what's worse than him not getting points is the fact that their goalkeeper got an assist before he did. So that just really, really rubs it in.
That is humiliating, really, isn't it? So, not surprisingly, at the minute I'm quite clear on those points, thanks to Sa getting 2 goals and 1 goal in the last 2 fixtures. So Sa's currently on 26 points, Gray's on 15, and I didn't even look at Adama's because I know it was so low, but I will keep recording Adama's. He's probably on about 5.
2 points times however many game weeks we've had.
Yeah, well, I'm thinking 5. 2 lots of 2 and then 1 coming off the bench. So not much further than that, but yeah, you never know. We might get 1 someday. He's got to convert that XG at one point, or not, as we've seen so far. Yeah, I think that will do it for looking back. So we will touch on, as we do in the middle every time, a bit of a quiz. Try not to make it too long with certain Champions League games on that we might want to catch the end of. But I've tried to finally do a quiz on this season's information, so we'll see how this one goes. So do you both know, well, you don't have to know how it's worked out, but the bonus point system, which basically works out the bonus points. So the first round is on that. So you can get points on the bonus point system for various things like completed passes, obviously goals, assists, etc. So do you understand what I mean when I say the bonus point system? Yeah. So rather than like getting 3 bonus points, I'm on about the score they got to get those bonus points that you see on the bottom of the FPL page. Yeah. You get what I mean by that?
Yep.
Yeah, good. I just wanted to make sure it was clear so there's no debate before we started.
Yeah, that's fine.
Right, so I think it's Liverpool against Arsenal here. So I'm going to let Sam go first because I think his is easier as a Liverpool fan compared to Arsenal's. So I need you, so far this season on the first 6 game weeks, Sam, I need you to name the top 5 Liverpool players on the bonus point system. If you give me them in the right order, you will also get a bonus point. So name all 5, you get 1 for each, and then if you get them in the correct order, I'll give you a bonus point.
Wow. Okay.
So, so you might want to think about what.
Start now.
Yeah. So if you start now, I'm not putting you on a timer, but so if you start with the highest first.
Okay.
I won't tell you till the end if you've got them in the right order.
Well, I think the highest is Trent, so I'm going to start with him.
Trent is correct. But I'm not. That is the correct answer. I'm not telling you it's
Yeah, that's order. Okay. That's fine. That's fine. Trent, Salah.
Yeah.
Van Dijk.
Yeah.
Jordan Henderson?
That's incorrect.
That's inconvenient.
So you can have one more guess to get a point, but you won't have got them all for the bonus.
Alisson?
Yeah, that's right. So you got 4 out of 5. You got the top 4, and the 5th one was pretty close between Matip and Jota, and Matip was 5th. They get a lot of points passing around the back.
Yeah, should have thought. I thought Henderson getting a lot of points passing it sideways, you know.
Yeah. So actually, top was Van Dijk.
Okay.
So it was Van Dijk, Salah, Trent, and then Alisson. Okay. Out of the 4 that you gave, and then Matip and Jota in 6th.
Right.
So you get 4 points still for that. So yeah, not too bad. So over to you, Charlie, which I would argue is slightly more difficult using Arsenal. And so you've got a slight help with this one. So the 5th placed player, there's 2 on the same amount of points. So I will give you the point for either of those, if you get either of those right. That makes sense. So
okay, starting from top.
Yeah.
Well, we've not scored a lot of goals, so I'm going to assume it's not going to be an attacker that's top. So looking at defence or keeper, well, Ramsdale's not started all the games, so it's going to be one of the defenders. I would argue Tierney's the most involved, so I'm going to go Tierney as top.
Correct.
I'm just going to name the others. Okay.
Yeah. Well, you can keep doing it in order and see if you get. I'll tell you if you got the order right at the end.
The rest of the defenders aren't as involved, so it's whether or not they would have equaled someone like an Aubameyang or Saka or something. I'm going to go Saka second.
Correct.
Third, I would guess. Well, going on the similar logic of centre backs, I would say Ben White is going to be most involved centre back.
Correct.
I would guess the next one. I'm trying to think just who's most involved in doing stuff. Smith Rowe, number 4. I think that's number 4. And then
Correct.
fifth one, you said there's joint between 2.
Yeah.
I think I've got to go and attack. I would say Aubameyang.
Yeah, that's correct as well. So you got 5. The last place was joint with Aubameyang and Gabriel on 69, and you were so close to getting them in the right order. You got White and Smith Rowe the wrong way round. So it was Tierney, Saka, Smith Rowe, White, and then Aubameyang and Gabriel.
I was just trying to go on the centre back logic.
Yeah, because I think did White miss a few games? I don't think.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Every game. So I think that's the same with Gabriel as well. Because I think if Gabriel played every game, he probably would have got more than Aubameyang as well.
Probably true.
So yeah, so that's 5 to Charlie and 4 to Sam. So you both did quite well on that. But then we've got a second round, so we're going to be talking about wildcards after this, for potential wildcards. And I think midfielders is one of the places we're going to have a lot of debate. So I've got don't be looking at any FPL pages here because it'll give you away straight away. So I've got the top 20 scoring midfielders so far this season. So how this round is going to work, as Sam is losing, I'm going to let Sam go first. You both take it in turns to answer. If you get one wrong, you're still in the game, but it goes to the next person and it goes back to them. So I'm going to let you guess till you get to a point where you're getting a bit stuck. So it gives Sam a chance to get back into it, because if Charlie gets one wrong, then it'll go back to Sam anyway. So it's up to 20 points between you both. If that makes sense.
Yep. Yeah. Top 20. So.
Yeah, top 20. Yeah. So
okay.
I'll give
That's
you
quite a big leeway.
Yeah. So I'm going to tell you the top amount of points and the bottom amount of points, but I'm not going to give you any information after that as we go through. I'm not going to tell you what place they are in that 1 to 20. So the top scoring midfielder has got 57 points, and the lowest scoring midfielder has 26. So over to Sam.
Okay, well, let's start with Mo Salah.
Correct.
That feels an obvious one. Let's go with Greenwood.
That's correct.
Ben Rama.
That's correct.
Bruno.
Correct.
Pogba.
Correct.
I was actually looking this guy up the other week. Doucouré.
Correct.
Ferran Torres.
Correct.
Diego Jota.
Correct.
Rafinha.
Correct.
Quick shout out to Will with Sarr.
Correct.
Amari, the main man, Gray.
Yeah, I think you gave Sam that one, Charlie.
Well, yeah, fair enough.
Yeah, that triggered the memory there.
Remember ones we've said before.
Yeah, if you re-say one, I'll let you off and I'll tell you if we've said it
Okay.
before. I'm not that harsh.
Good.
So we've had 11 so far, there's 9 left.
Someone that I'm maybe a potential on the wildcard, Gallagher.
Correct.
For Damari's psychic, Andros Townsend.
Correct.
Don't believe we've said Sadio Mane yet.
That is correct. We've not said him either.
Okay. Son.
Correct.
My man Saka.
Correct. You got
Got
4.
two more names.
Got 4 left.
Okay. Kovacic.
Correct.
Yes.
What? When's he ever got points?
Goals, mate. He
Yeah,
got a goal
yeah.
in. Yeah.
He got like a goal and assist, didn't he, in the same game?
Yeah.
3 left.
We must be talking like limited points at this point. What did you say the bottom was? 20 something?
26.
26. That's like 2 goals and nothing, and appearance points.
Yeah, I'd argue Torres got most of his points in one game, so you can depends how you do.
The cheap alternative to Ben Rama, Fornals.
Correct.
Been hyped up recently.
So I've got 2 left.
Flipping coins now.
I think now
We've got one just to put it out there.
We're flipping coins between one Palace player and one Brighton player.
Benteke, you're right. It's Benteke.
Off the back of his penalty last night, I'm going to go for Zaha.
Correct.
Ugh,
So we've got one answer
last
left.
one.
If you get it wrong, Charlie, it'll pass over to Sam.
I haven't got it, by the way, so
Remind
I'll
me
be
of
going for the Brighton player.
Warpress. That's not my guess. What's the point scoring if Sam gets this? By the way,
So
because I'm already had 5-4, right?
yeah, so at the minute you're tied. If you get this, because Sam's winning by 1 point on this, and you won by
Oh,
1
okay,
point on the
yeah, I
last
see what you
one.
mean. Okay.
So if you win this, well, if you get this one right, then you win. If neither of you get this, then we go into the final bonus round, which we'll probably still draw on. So I think I'm going to give you both. I think it's quite difficult, but I'm not good. I don't want you to get it. I'm going to give you both 2 wrong answers. So,
Okay.
But if you get it wrong, then it goes to Sam. So
All right, like back and forth. Okay.
yeah,
I am gonna take a stab at Grealish.
incorrect. So it goes over to Sam. So you've had 1 wrong answer.
I'm going to go. Yeah, I don't know if this is right, but I was flipping a coin between this guy and Zaha. I'll go for Trossard.
Incorrect.
Ugh.
Back to Charlie. So this is your last guess, Charlie.
Now, I think because there's been players that I've been looking at for my squad. I feel like I should be using one of those names because I'm going to put them in if they've been doing well, and therefore they should have some points.
Fair play if you're putting this guy in your squad. Fair play. That's all I'm saying.
Well, that's throwing me. There's a name. There's a name I'm thinking of. I think I'm just going to go for it. And this is a bit of a shout out to the chat. I'm going to go with Tielemans because of Hills in the chat.
I think that hint might have helped a bit. It is Tielemans, yeah.
What a shout!
Out the bag. I think he's an alright pick, actually.
He's played every minute and he's got a goal and 2 assists. So.
Wow, I would never have got anywhere near Tielemans. Leicester have been woeful this season.
Yeah,
they've in terms of going forward anyway. At least they get some goals, and he tends to be involved whenever something's happening. So.
Yeah, well done.
Yeah,
well done.
That inspiration by Hills in the chat has helped you there. I'm not sure who
that did make me think.
That clue might have gave you a slight help, but I don't think it was the biggest help. It might have thrown you slightly off some of the random ones you were going to pick for your wildcard. But yeah, so that's Charlie, the winner there, by 1 point, based on that first round.
Tied it up overall.
Yeah, that's what I said. You're going to draw overall, aren't you? We're going to have to have like a showdown. Yeah, we're just going to have a quiz episode, the last one of the season, just to decide who wins. But yeah.
The half-time goal flash in the Champions League. Liverpool are 2 up against Porto. Man City are continuing to lose. And Real Madrid are losing at home to Sheriff Tiraspol.
Up the Sheriff, that's all you can say, really, isn't it? Yeah. What's going on for Sam so far, should we say there? So we'll move on to the kind of main topic that we kind of wanted to discuss about wildcarding, as I know it's on a lot of people's thoughts for especially game week 7, maybe even game week 8. So I think we'll go to Sam first, because I feel like from our previous discussions, Sam may be close to it either this week or next week. So what are your current plans in terms of wildcard, Sam?
Yeah, so I was a little bit disappointed with my score this week, and my initial reaction was just a wildcard this week. Mm-hmm. But I really, really like the wildcard after the international break. So if there's any chance I can hold this week and maybe just take like a 4-point hit if needed to save the flexibility after the international break, I might just do that. But there are a lot of fixtures this week that really make me think that the wild card is just like the one to go, like Chelsea at home to Southampton. I'm currently going into that fixture with no Chelsea players. Just there's a lot of holes around. Whether or not Trent is going to be available, he didn't travel to Porto this week with Liverpool, so no one really quite knows what's going on there. Shaw came off at the weekend. Don't know whether he'll be playing against Everton. So if I can work it so that I don't have to play the wild card this week, I probably won't now, and we'll hold it for next week, because just the value of having it after the international break, I think, is potentially greater than playing it this week and one of the guys you bring in getting injured.
Yeah, and just to address 2 of those injury doubts that you kind of just touched on. So on Shaw, he hasn't been training, but they're going to see if he can make it for the Villarreal game, which I can't see him being risked in. So I think there's a chance that he should be fine for the weekend. I don't think they'll risk him in the Champions League, and I think he'll be back for the weekend. That is my initial thoughts from what Ollie said in his press conference. Because they said they'll try to do everything they can to get him into the Villarreal game, but I don't think you should really be risking him. So he's not that far off fitness, so he should be okay. The latest news I saw about Trent, I think there was a quote from Klopp before the Champions League game that said the injury was more serious than they first thought. And people, this isn't from Klopp himself, but people have said around a 3-week, so he would miss the City game, but maybe the one after the international break, but not much further than that. So that is what's been said currently, and I've seen that Trent's status has been updated on the FPL website to reflect that comment as well. So I think currently there's more doubt about Trent making this game week than there is Shaw. That is the latest.
Interesting. Well, to be fair, Trent against City is a less attractive defensive proposition than Shaw at home to Everton. Either one's probably going to concede. I mean, with Ayling out as well, that really literally takes me down to the bone of Marçal, Shaw and Livramento, who's at home against Lukaku, and that's not exactly an appealing thought either. So I think it might be just a patch together team this week and then wildcard next week.
Yeah, I can say one of the main reasons I've got that I wanted to say about the potential wildcard that I feel people might we're trying to hold it to 8, but all these injuries that are coming up might force a lot of people to do it in 7. So, for example, I've got Bamford in my team. Rafinha, there's still a bit of a doubt if I wanted to bring him in. There's Shaw, Trent that you've touched on. I think there's someone else even in my team who's flagged. So there's a lot of flags going around, and like you said, I'm currently relying on Brownhill to get me some points to get me a full 11. So it's not an ideal situation, but I think ideally from my point of view, I'm currently not planning to wildcard in 7. I'm hoping to even go further than 8 currently, but I might be forced to due to the injuries. And I'll talk about transfers because I've actually already made my transfers again week 7, hoping that I get away with them. But if some injuries go wrong, then I'm kind of forced into wildcarding because I've made those transfers. But I'll let Charlie answer the wildcard question before we get onto those transfers. So what are your plans, Charlie?
So I'm of the same opinion. I'm going to try and hold it. I kind of made that decision last week for sure because I held my transfer. Quite a few people were transferring Bamford out. I decided just to leave him on my bench because I wanted to carry 2 transfers into this week.
Yeah.
Which by association means that I wasn't going to wildcard this week because it would have been a waste of carrying that transfer over. So yeah, I kind of made my decision earlier that I wanted to carry it over and not wildcard this week. I think similarly, I'm in a position where there's a couple of key injuries where it almost tips me into it. But the fact that I've got the 2 free transfers, I'm not opposed to perhaps also taking -4 and then just making 3 transfers. When the Trent news broke, that actually kind of reinforces my thinking because I feel like what I can do is potentially, because Trent's only risen 0.1 since the beginning of the game. So I'm considering just taking him out this week. And that helps me in my move for Lukaku, who's going to be the main kind of person that I'm bringing in, which is likely Lukaku's like to come in for Bamford. But the flexibility of keeping the wildcard means then I can bring Trent back in once we get confirmation of he's going to be coming back in. And that feels like a move that a lot of people aren't going to have the ability to do necessarily or would feel too risky about doing it if they didn't have a wildcard to be able to just bring him back in, because that's a lot of funds to be able to get him back in. So keeping the wildcard allows me to do that. And like Sam said, I think the best use of it will be through the international break, where we're likely potentially to see more injuries picked up or COVID things or whatever. So I prefer keeping it to game week 8 and even potentially, like you said, well, maybe keeping it later if possible, dependent on injuries. But I can see the appeal of wildcarding now to kind of jump on certain players and fixture runs, and because of the injuries. But I'm going to try and play it safe and hold.
Yeah, I think with the fixtures as well, when I look at my game week 7 team, I think the fixtures I've got with my current team would actually be better than some of the wildcard players that I would bring in this week. So I think outside of Chelsea, which understandably against Southampton's good fixture, but a lot of the other fixtures, I don't think I would particularly benefit. For example, if you wanted to bring a City or a Liverpool player in there playing against each other. So that's also a benefit of playing in game week 8, and that big one that we've all mentioned about the international break. I think the good thing about that as well, you can activate your wildcard straight away after game week 7, and you've got 2 weeks as well to make the most of price changes, which is a good way to gain some value at the same time, because there'll be a lot of price changes in that period. And as we mentioned with the injuries, I think before we get onto the wildcard, then we've kind of all touched on it there. So if you was making your transfers now, Charlie, you just said you got 2. Without getting any added news at this point in time, what transfers would you be making?
So the likeliness is Bamford for Lukaku and Trent down to whatever that leaves me with the idea of probably playing. I think if I'm going to do that move, I've got to make a decision on playing the wildcard definitely in game week 8. Because I want Trent season long. I'm happy to lose him for this game if he's not going to play, but I want him back in. So I think, like I did last week, I think I'm going to have to make a decision for the following week, a week early, to work out what I'm going to do. If I don't get rid of Trent, it will likely mean either Bruno moves on and downgrades to someone, or taking a -4 and kind of having a bit of a clear out of my defence, getting rid of the people that I've talked about, like Digne. I can't raise the funds just from one of those, so it'll probably be two of them, getting rid of them to free up a bit of funds just to help make that Lukaku transfer.
Yeah, I quite like that idea you're saying with Trent, but yeah, it does force you into that. You can't really carry it much further than 8, can you, then with your wildcard? But I do like the thinking of that. That's quite quick thinking on the back of that Trent injury to do that. So Sam, have you any idea of your transfers? I feel like I might have thrown you off a bit by the Shaw and Trent developments. But if you was thinking now, what transfer or more than one transfer would you be making?
Not really 100% sure, to be honest. I haven't really done enough research into it as to what I'm going to do next week. I think a lot of it depends on if there's anything that comes out of the Champions League games this week. But I definitely am going to use a transfer because I'm almost certainly going to be playing the wild card in game week 8. I like the thought of bringing in a Chelsea asset just for Southampton at home. I think that's probably going to be a clean sheet. So I might favour a defensive asset, but maybe just take Trent out for 1 week. Brentford away next week for Chelsea probably isn't going to be gift wrapped. Then they go Norwich at home, Newcastle away. So Lukaku's going to be coming in game week 8 for sure. But I mean, that's in certainly not actually for Luke Shaw, but I think a Chelsea player is probably coming in this week.
Yeah, so I mentioned I've done my transfers already, so I've already added a Chelsea player to my team in hope that we don't get any injuries to come. So I've done Bruno and Bamford to Rafinha and Lukaku. So I'm taking. I caught it before Lukaku's price rise as well, which I wanted to do. So I've kind of put my eggs in my basket already, and I'm hoping for no more injuries. I need Trent or Shaw to be fit realistically to pull it off, and hope Rafinha's slight knock, which he's been playing with, is okay. But I'm quite happy with those. I think we touched on it earlier with Charlie that Rafinha is kind of a must-have, especially with Bamford out. And then we mentioned Chelsea as well. Lukaku will probably come in and most likely be captained as well. So I think there's a good benefit of that transfer for now, and that's building up those Chelsea assets to try avoid having to wildcard with a potential maybe defender the following week. But I quite like City's run as well. So I'm very conflicted between, after the international break, Chelsea or a City defender if I'm only going to do one transfer. So, and there you go. I put my cards on the table. You know what I'm doing already, guys. So you can do what you like with that information. But yeah.
One player who will almost certainly be coming in for me after the international break is Cancelo. He's just made an unbelievable start to the season, and probably frustrated myself that I didn't stick to what I thought I should have done and picked him at the start. But yeah, he will almost certainly be coming in.
Yeah, it is the big one. I think if they didn't have Cancelo and you had Zinchenko and Walker playing at fullback, Cancelo was out or something, I think I might have just avoided City's defence for that run. But Cancelo is just an unreal asset at the minute. So it's Cancelo or a Chelsea defender as my transfer after that, probably, barring any injuries. That Trent one might throw some spanners into that as well. So we'll see how it develops. But I've gone early and hopefully it works. What I was going to say about, I think I was slating a few weeks ago having Tony in my team as my only fit striker, but I quite like Tony now because he's been doing quite well the last few weeks, and I think from game week 10 they've got a decent run as well. So I've warmed to Tony now. That sat in my team for that long. So I think he was one of the ones I was moaning about when, kind of like what Sam said, when he had a bad week. I think I had a bad week. I think I was on the last one. I was like, shall I just wildcard now? But I've warmed to certain players now, so they're going to stay for slightly longer, hopefully, barring injury. But I think that kind of discussion links well into the wildcard discussion. So I think we'll start with the defence. Let me try and get my team up at the same time on the stream for everybody. So I know you said, Charlie, that you've kind of prepared a bit of a wildcard draft for us to have a look at as well. I've actually just gone on the FPL website and now my team looks horrendous because I've got 4 yellow flags. But because the Trent's status is now updated, unfortunately. So if we start with defence, Charlie, if you was on a wildcard, what defenders would you be going for?
So yeah, this is by no means locked in, but I've put Trent, Rudiger, Cody, Ayling, and Livramento. I think it offers a kind of nice blend of the kind of players that aren't going to go anywhere. So the likes of Trent and Rudiger are basically just going to play every week, regardless of who they're playing. And then a nice sort of rotation. Obviously, depends on Ayling's injury, but I would kind of pick and choose between the Leeds defence at that price. Cody with the nice fixtures, and Livramento I think is probably the best option at that price for the like below. I think he's now 4.2, but that kind of price or below. Given Southampton's fixtures, I think he would be an ideal sort of backup in case one of your defenders doesn't play. So I think that obviously does hinge on the fact that you're doing it now and not a bit later, when I'd maybe go for Cancelo instead and try and work him in somehow. But I think, yeah, wildcarding this week, that's the team I'd go with. But obviously, yeah, the Trent news came after that, so maybe I'll do something different around that. But I think that's, yeah, a fairly set defence going forward if you were good to go with that.
Yeah, I think that main area that I was thinking when you said that was the City defender, which is probably the main difference between our twos. And obviously, I've got Trent in mind as well because we did it slightly before that news. So what I was thinking was Trent, Rudiger, same as you. So did you think you'd keep Ayling in your team?
Well, yeah, I think just purely based on fixtures. Now, obviously, there's all these injury worries, and the fact that they are Leeds and that they tend to just concede goals for fun. But yeah, I think I still have some faith in them, given the games they've got coming up, to keep some, and it would only be purely on a rotation basis. I'd only be playing 3 defenders each week in the team that I've built.
Okay.
And therefore I would only maybe need him once every couple of weeks at most. So yeah, it would just be kind of a nice rotation option if needed.
Yeah, I think I'd argue there's probably better options for that price given Leeds' shoddy defence, but that's up for debate, isn't it, really? That was when you said you'd line up, I was like, I kind of agree with the structure of the rest, not really with that one. So what I've got, which is on the stream and on the screen, so I had Livramento as well, Rudiger, Trent. Instead of Cody, I had Semedo, and then instead of Ayling, I've got Cancelo, because we kind of touched on the Cancelo that I think even in that Liverpool game, we could still get something. So yeah, I think when you're on a wildcard as well, obviously you're planning for that game week, but you've got to think long term as well. So you don't want to be booking in that transfer next week to bring in that City defender. So I quite like the idea of getting in on it now. If you would have wildcard in Sam, would your defence be much different to those suggestions? Anyone else you would have had in there? Can you hear Sam, Charlie?
No, lost him.
I think we've lost him there.
Hello.
Hello.
Oh, there you go. Yep.
Back.
You're back.
Back. Sorry. Yeah, so I don't think it would be too different. Cancelo and Trent shoe-ins. Flip a coin between Rudiger and maybe Marcus Alonso as a Chelsea option, just because probably offers a little bit more attacking threat. Marçal, I don't really see any reason to take him out at this point, and then Livramento's in there as like the enabler, and he's getting minutes, so no real reason to change that. Keepers will stay as they are for the season.
Yeah, so if you was going, then if we move on to midfield, Sam, what kind of players and structure would you be going for in midfield?
I mean, basically Salah and not sure, probably not Bruno, I guess is the formula. It's a bit of a strange one, but I'm just trying to literally flick around with like a team at the moment, and I think Salah, taking Tsimikas out earlier in the season because I wanted the flexibility of the third Liverpool option. Having Jota and Salah both playing as strikers for Liverpool as midfield options is just almost too good an opportunity to turn down. And there aren't really like an absolute screaming number of players like alternatives in those positions to really go for. So I'd probably say Salah and Jota both make the cut. Probably keep Benrahma in. Yeah. And then it might be the time to change from Greenwood. Probably it's blanked for a few game weeks in a row now. So maybe like an Ismail Sarr, maybe even like a Gray or Townsend, something like that.
Yeah, does your team, Charlie, kind of fit along those themes as well? You've got that. Well, I'm assuming we've all got Salah in there. Just take that talking point out
there. My team follows quite similarly to what you've got up on the stream, Will.
Yeah.
So Salah and Rafinha are the kind of first names that I put in. The kind of mid-priced option, I was kind of toying between a few. You've got Grealish there, and that was someone that I was considering for that Man City run, because I think if you're going to go any of the attacking options, I think you go him. De Bruyne seems to be more of a regular starter, but at that price now, you can't really fit him in. So I think I'd tend to go Grealish. I did have a look at Mount potentially, but I think there's some, again, injury doubts around him and whatever. So I think if he were an assured full fitness and back in the starting lineup a few times, then maybe you'd consider Mount. I had Saka as well. You've got Smith Rowe there. I went with Saka. I just feel like he's worth the extra money over Smith Rowe if you're going to go for them. Obviously, they're both a bit of a punt, to be fair, based on their previous sort of goal scoring records or points returns. But given the fixtures, given the kind of form of late, and between the two of them, I think Saka is much more involved and has a much better end product than Smith Rowe, who I feel like, if anything, it's most likely to be Smith Rowe assisting, Saka scoring of the two. And then, I just got a 4.5 bench player. So, pretty similar to what you've got, really. And then you've got Gallagher there, I can see, who, again, was in my thinking, but I think is someone I would bring in later down the line. Palace have on and off fixtures for the moment, but then I think around 11, game week 12, 11, somewhere around then, starts to get much better, and I think about bringing him in then.
Yeah, I think very much with my team, some of them are there for a few fixtures down the line. How I've structured the team, well, at the minute you can include Foster as well. Like, all this team would be starting games and getting hopefully 90 minutes, but most of the minutes you can obviously debate about Grealish getting rotated. But so that allows me to put Gallagher or whatever on the bench, but then it might get stung by some bench points. But there are certain ones, Gallagher, that you can bring in and out of the team, matches all right with Smith Rowe as well. So obviously they're all not going to be playing at the same time. Sam mentioned Ben Rama as well. What do you think about Ben Rama, Charlie? Would you be getting rid of him? Do you have Antonio in the team?
I do have Antonio. I think Antonio doesn't leave my squad until he gets injured, as we've spoken about before. I don't think there's any team bar probably Chelsea and maybe Man City. Probably definitely, actually. I think Chelsea, Man City, you don't expect him to score. I think anyone else, even Liverpool, from what we've seen recently, I think you could not expect, but feel like he could score against any of them. So for that reason, because I don't West Ham's fixtures upcoming aren't great, so I don't think I'd want to double up. Ideally, I would want to. Another reason why I like keeping hold of that wild card is I think Ben Rama's a great asset going into this Brentford game. For the same reasons we saw in the Brentford versus Liverpool game, it's going to be really open. I think the same thing will happen with the West Ham game. So I still like him for this game week, but I wouldn't want him after that. So I think, I wouldn't want to double up on West Ham going forward, and Antonio is by far the better option.
Yeah, I think playing the fixtures, you don't want to double up for West Ham, but I think Ben Rama the last few games has been one of the sharpest players for West Ham, actually. I remember making a joke before watching the United game that he didn't look very sharp in the warm-up, but then, like, in the game, most of the attacking play went via him. Obviously, Antonio was out for that game, but he seems to have kind of really settled in that team rather than like last season. So if you're not wildcarding, I think he's one you can be keeping, but he's one of those luxury transfers, isn't he, really? If you're on a wildcard, you'd be taking him out, but if you've got him in your normal team, I'd be sticking with him. I'll be sticking with him for now, I think. I think there's other fires people need to be fighting on that regard. So I quite like it, because I think, like when Sam says keep Ben Rama in there, I think a lot of people will get rid of him, and you could get some benefit from keeping him in there. But we'll see how that one goes.
I think also there's no screamingly obvious player at that maybe Rafinha, but outside of that, there's no real obvious pick. So I think that in itself helps you choose a bit of a differential, or someone that people are coming off, because the kind of ownership's going to be so split between a multitude of different players around that price. So I mean, it's by no means someone I'm looking to shift on. But yeah, like you say, when you've got the luxury of having a wildcard and unlimited transfers, I think it makes sense just for the long term.
Yeah, that like 6.5 to 8.5 range, there's not much really there, is there? It's not. There's kind of players that can hit a form at certain stages, but none of them are firing at the minute. So that's why I'm inclined to go for some more cheap ones in midfield, and then maybe going with a Cancelo and making sure I've got 3 strikers to cover that as well. But I think this is where it gets a lot more interesting, isn't it? Because you're going to see a lot more different scores when it comes to wildcard season. So it should be a lot more range, and the league might get a bit more spread out for now. We'll see with that. So up front, Sam, if on your wildcard, would you be keeping Antonio as well, and who would you have alongside him?
Yeah, so Antonio would come back in for me, and then Lukaku would come in. And I think probably be sticking with benchman Tony, around the 6 million mark. There's a few in there. Like I see you've got Armstrong in that one there, so that's not too bad a shout, I don't think. But yeah, Tony's proven that he's got a bit about him at this level. So in the games where I want to switch to a front three, or particularly just want to run with the front three, I haven't really got a problem with just running with Tony.
Yeah, when I was drafting this, I very reluctantly took Tony out because it was Tony, Antonio, and Lukaku, and I'm like, I should really, but then it could easily tweak it to get Tony in there because he's only 0.3 more. Very much Armstrong and Grealish were the ones that could easily be changed for someone else when I was doing that. I was a bit in between with those ones. I'm assuming you, Charlie, have got Antonio and Lukaku.
I do indeed.
Making that assumption.
Yeah, I think they're both a lock in anyone's teams. The third man, so I toyed with this a little bit. I think if he wasn't injured, I would go Bamford, because I think those fixtures are still great, especially regardless of what you think of their defence, particularly now. They're always going to have opportunities and score goals. So I would think I would go Bamford, but because he's got that injury, I would probably go with Jimenez, I think. I had the funds to do that in the squad that I built. And I think now that he's scored that goal, that can that eases some of the pressure, and that just kind of allows him a bit of confidence. And their fixtures are still good enough to, for the next 10-ish weeks, to get something, expect something from. So yeah, I think he was kind of the best of a sort of bad bunch of the rest of them. I don't. Maybe if Wilson were fit similarly, I'd consider him. But yeah, I think it's just best to go with the striker that's fit and has just scored a goal. It makes sense for me.
Yeah, I was tempted to do Antonio Jimenez, but then you can't look really past Antonio in that kind of price range at the minute. Like you said, you keep him there if he's fit when he gets an injury, which could happen, as we know, with him in previous years, but not for me for now. So in goal, Sam, who would you be going for in goal? Would you be sticking with Sanchez, who I think you and Charlie both have at the minute?
Yeah, I mean, quite literally until I just saw your selection on screen, I think there is really no reason in my mind to be changing Sanchez. Brighton have looked pretty sound at the back. They've got a tough couple of fixtures coming up where they play Arsenal at home. Probably be challenged to keep a clean sheet in that one. Probably fancy them to keep a clean sheet at Norwich, and then they've got City, Liverpool. But then the run of fixtures after that really isn't too bad for 10 games. So probably tempted to stick with Sanchez, but would maybe think about putting Foster in as the number 2, because he looks like he's going to be getting some starts for Watford.
It's quite funny to me at the minute because I've got Backman and Foster, so I'll just keep starting Backman and then Foster is coming off the bench because I've done that 2 kind of goalkeeper setup, so it's quite funny at the minute. It's working for me. Well, it's not working for me because they're not getting many points, but at least I've got that coverage when our goalkeeper's injured. Are you sticking with Sanchez, Charlie?
I have, but I did put in brackets Ramsdale ? You can see you've got me in yours.
Yeah.
I think I'm never confident. I'm probably as confident as I've ever been about as an Arsenal clean sheets going forward, but that's still not a high bar. So I'd be concerned, but again, we're talking about 4.5 of the other options. I'm not expecting a lot from Sanchez. You know, maybe a clean sheet every 3 weeks or something. I'd be happy with. And Ramsdale's made 3 saves in both the last 2 games. So we are a team that allows some shots on goal. So he could also be making the saves as well. There would be a slight doubt in the back of my mind. I'm almost certain he's set in the team now as the number 1. But the change from Leno to him was so quick and seemingly, well, from the outside, random at least. But I guess obviously from the inside, there's been a sort of logical plan there of bringing Ramsdale in and then making him the number 1. I'd be slightly worried just in case that gets reversed for whatever reason it got implemented in the first place. But for now, he seems to be the number 1 and he's been doing really well. So I don't see why Arteta would change him. So yeah, I think he's a good shout, but I just went for the kind of slow and steady option of keeping Sanchez in. And yeah, I've got Foster as the backup just because he does seem to be playing for the moment until Backman comes back.
Yeah, I feel like I've got to a position with Sanchez that I've not gone with him from the start, so I'm just resistant to get him in my team. I'm too far down the line to settle for his 2 or 6 points every week. But we'll see with that one. Probably being a bit too stubborn with that. But we'll see later on. Maybe that wildcard, if I end up doing it later in the season, I might get Sanchez in, but we'll see where we go with that. But I think covered that quite well. Is there anything you thought was missing from that, guys, on the wildcard?
No, I think that's it.
I think that's fine.
Yeah, I think with the fixtures, obviously, there's a big swing with the Chelsea fixtures, so you could argue even a double Chelsea defence maybe in there. Like if you wanted to go Cancelo to another Chelsea defender, but I think that's quite a good structure to work with, and there's probably like one in each position you could move about depending on who you prefer. Like Grealish, just a bit of a punt for those 3 fixtures for City, and then go from there really. Yeah, I'll move off that screen, and we will try and keep the last section a bit shorter than usual. I think we'll skip to who do we think would be the best captaincy for the next game week to you, Sam? Or in your current team, who you'd be going for, and who, if you make any transfers,
The best captaincy, I can't look past Rom Lukaku at home for Chelsea against Southampton. In terms of my team, who's going to be getting the armband, it's a bit of a tough one. I might actually give it to Jimenez at home to Newcastle.
Definitely a differential on that. I quite like it, to be fair.
Yeah.
So
having said that, I'll probably end up giving it to Salah. But
yeah, even down, give it to Salah.
I quite like this. I think this game week is going to be a tough one for me in general. So I think going Jimenez at home to Newcastle could be. It's going to be, going to be big or it's going to be bust. But yeah, I mean, Newcastle got more holes at the back than a colander, so I think Jimenez is going to have a fair few chances.
Yeah, I like that pick. I'm not going to lie. Hopefully, Semedo kind of getting a booming attack in return. I'll take it if Semedo crosses it to Jimenez. I'll give you that one, Sam. But
Salah is in form though. He's just scored again, and Liverpool now lead Porto 3-0.
And he doesn't shy away from the big games as well, so I wouldn't be surprised if he scores against Man City.
Yeah, we do have a tendency to get penalties against Man City at Anfield. That is one thing that we had one last year and lost 4-1. So
same against Chelsea as well, wasn't it? And got that penalty, so we can always score in the big games. Yeah,
I mean, Salah's just a world class player, so if you've got that option, it might be naive not to go for it. And I said at the start of the season, I want to give the armband to the big premium assets, but Fernandes isn't exactly in form. Salah is, but Newcastle at home just looks like such a good fixture to back Jimenez in. Yeah,
it's one of those ones that you want to target into. So
yeah,
that's a good one. If that comes off, it comes off big, doesn't it? That's a big.
Doesn't it? It's pain.
I feel like you've got to do those tactical ones at some point. Like you said, you've not
Yeah,
got that
I
many, not got that many options to choose from. So
the league's so close to the minute anyway. Like anything could change over the course of the season. So if you can get a few points in the bag now from one of these pulling off, it might help you out down the line.
yeah, definitely. And the option that you touched on, Lukaku, is currently where my armband is sat. I think I've got him captain and Antonio vice. So I don't, unless Lukaku picks up an injury or there's some doubt about him playing, it's going to stay on him. Because I think Chelsea are away at Juventus, aren't they? Which is quite a difficult game. That was the only thing that was putting me off doing a transfer early, but I went for it anyway. So fingers crossed with that one that he didn't pick anything up. But who will you be going for, Charlie's captaincy currently?
Well, of my current team, it's Antonio, but that is in large part due to the fact that I don't have Lukaku yet. He almost certainly will. Lukaku almost certainly will be coming in, and it would feel silly not to captain him if I am going to bring him in. So really, it's between those two. I'd make a kind of differential shout for Rafinha at home to Watford. Watford have been conceding quite a few, so I wouldn't mind him as a differential pick. I actually think Man United at home to Everton isn't a bad fixture either, just because I don't think Everton defensively have been very good, as I've been able to see many and many times with Digne. But the problem being, I only have Bruno, so I wouldn't feel comfortable going to that game, particularly what happened with the penalty. Whether that now means Ronaldo's on penalties or whatever happens, I just wouldn't be confident with Bruno, so I don't think I'd captain it. If I had Ronaldo, I'd consider it, but I don't think I'd captain Bruno, and I'm likely going to end up transferring him out anyway. So yeah, long story short, probably Lukaku if he comes in. If not, then Antonio.
Yeah, very similar to my thinking. Yeah, I was kind of similar with that United kind of setup. I'm not unhappy having Shaw and Greenwood, obviously if Shaw's fit in that game, but the treble up was a bit too much for me, and obviously I needed to make room for Lukaku by taking Bruno out. So I think we could have been looking at Bruno a lot differently if he scored that penalty. It's funny how one action, well, I think we was all looking at him differently anyway, but there won't be such a rush to get him out if he hadn't missed that penalty, and there's kind of a doubt if he will get a penalty, because I think everyone thought that Ronaldo was going to be on penalties, probably me included. I think I said like 90% chance that Ronaldo will get them, but I think Bruno could still be on them, to be fair. All the stuff that was going on around it afterwards, I still think there's a doubt that Ronaldo will actually get penalties, so I won't be rushing to get Ronaldo either. I was going to ask, Charlie just touched on Rafinha. I was going to ask you both the last question, and I was going to say to Sam, is he scared of not having Rafinha for this week, or is there any other players that he was a bit scared of not having in his team for this week?
Well, as I said, I'm not exactly thrilled about the thought of having no Chelsea assets. I'm more concerned about not having a Chelsea asset than not having Rafinha, to be honest.
Yeah.
That's my thoughts on it.
Yeah, I think that's the issue, isn't it? If you're not wildcarding, then people who are wildcarding are basically bringing in triple Chelsea and jumping on that fixture run straight away. So that's the kind of thing we have to accept if we're doing it a week later or even later than that. But we can ride it out. Might be a few rough weeks, like you said as well. So, is there anyone from your team as well, then, Charlie, that you're kind of scared of not having in there? Well, we'll assume that you get Lukaku in, shall we, for the benefit of that.
Yeah, I think that move in part is because of that, and it therefore cancels out any worries I have about who I'm missing. It may well be that the second transfer and then a -4 ends up being including a Chelsea defender as well. So then I'd have 2 out of probably long-term 3 Chelsea players already. And yeah, I think basically those fixtures we've talked about where the captaincies like to go in is where I'd be worried about, and I've got good coverage in most of those games. So I think, yeah, only really the Chelsea game that I'd currently of my current team that I'd be worried about, but I'm likely to use both my transfers to get Chelsea players.
That is the way to go. Everyone bringing in a Chelsea player where possible. That's the best.
Southampton 1-0 win.
Yeah, you imagine.
Oh, we can dream.
I thought Sam was going to do that.
Livramento was a screamer.
Oh God! Don't say that.
I don't even know if it can, I assume he can play, right? There's no parent club.
Well, he's actually been sold, hasn't he? Yeah, so he's
sure enough.
They've got a buyback clause, but it's not on loan, so I don't think they get that kind of option.
Yeah.
We can dream, since I haven't got him. But yeah, I don't think we'll touch on the fixtures too much because I'm wary of the Champions League stuff will catch, and I think the wildcard was the main bit we wanted to cover. So unless you guys have got anything you particularly wanting to add on top of that, I think we'd call it there. Have you got anything to add?
No, happy with that.
Yeah, that sounds good. Then you're alright with that, Sam?
Yeah, that's good.
Let's see if you can get off and see if Salah grabs that last goal to get his hat trick.
Let's see. Let's see.
That's great. Thank you both, and thank you everyone for listening. And we will see you again. Well, probably not next week because we've got an international break, but we will keep you updated, and we'll definitely be back before the next game week. Thank you all for listening.